All Indiana Politics is your premier source for Indiana politics, focusing on issues that matter to you.
I still want us to be the best in the Midwest.
We can't afford another lockdown.
Give the citizens of this country the relief they need.
Education in the state of Indiana remains priority number one.
In-depth, nonpartisan coverage.
We don't know exactly where the economy will be in January.
People are worried with good reason.
Exclusive interviews with Indiana's political leaders.
We have the resources here in the state of Indiana to care for those who are in need.
Expert analysis on critical legislation.
We need to reform those laws.
This recovery is going to take some time.
We've got to anticipate that there'll be a budget shortfall.
From Wish TV, this is All Indiana Politics Podcast on the All Indiana Podcast Network.
I'm Garrett Bergquist, government reporter for Wish TV and the producer of All Indiana Politics. Congressman Frank Mrvan tells me he won't allow talk of redistricting to affect his work, including with members of the other party. Mrvan is one of 2 Indiana Democrats in Congress. His district covers Lake and Porter counties, along with part of LaPorte County. Mrvan's district is by far the most competitive in Indiana and has long been a Republican target. He spoke at a rally at the Statehouse last month protesting Vice President JD Vance's visit. Mrvan and I talked about redistricting and the impact of President Trump's trade policies on his district. We began, though, with the assassination of conservative activist Charlie Kirk, which happened the day before. And joining us now is Congressman Frank Mrvan from Indiana's 1st Congressional District. Congressman, welcome to All Indiana Politics.
Thank you, Garrett. It's a pleasure to be here today.
Now, before we get into other topics, I do first want to get your reaction to the murder of Charlie Kirk at a Turning Point USA event in Utah. Are you concerned that this is part of a growing trend of political violence in this country?
Well, I am concerned. One, I want to make sure that my condolences go out to his wife, Erica, and to his family. And of course, there's been an escalation in violence, and we need to make sure that as a country, we find ways to unite and to come together. Today is also the memorial of 9/11. And that brought our country together. And we were able to overcome all divisions and obstacles to understand that we're all Americans. And I think that in that vein, that we need to move in that direction.
What role will you play as an elected official in trying to break that violence, that cycle of violence?
Sure. So what I've consistently done since I was on the floor of January 6th is make sure that I act in a civil way and that I secure and advance policies that advance working men and women and make sure that our veterans are taken care of, and that I reach across the aisle or find middle ground. And I do it in a civil manner. Consistently over the last 5 years, I've served with the attitude of what can we do, what's best for Northwest Indiana, what's best for the region, the state, and our nation. And when you look at things in those terms, I think that it's a whole new perspective. And so eventually we're going to be talking about redistricting, but I believe in a country that provides good health care, and the big beautiful bill takes away Medicare and Medicaid, and it's a perfect storm in Indiana. We have to work at bringing that back and making sure that there's certainty in our health care and our mental health, which is important. I want to make sure that our workers are able to work in a safe place and that they're able to make a good living and that they're able to get a pension and health care. And so when you focus on those types of things, then you overcome everything that is dividing our nation.
All 7 of your Republican counterparts in Indiana's delegation have publicly called for congressional districts to be redrawn. What was your reaction when you saw them release all of those statements over the course of a few hours? Have you talked to them about that?
I haven't talked to them about that, but I've made sure I reached out, shook their hands, and continued business as usual. I think a great example of that is Congresswoman Houchin has a bill which is called the Field Act. Our farmers need relief right now. Our farmers need accessible internet and accessible wireless to be able to do their job. They're faced with, because of this economy and what Trump is doing with the tariffs. I was with the farmers, the Her Farm, and I spoke with Jody and the Farm Bureau, and they talked about their input costs, which are their fertilizers, their nitrates, and their insecticides. Those are 40% more expensive than they have been. And so not only do they have these expenses going up, but their markets are being strangled or they're being limited because of tariffs and other countries not buying as much soybean, as much corn. And so we have to do what we can to open up these economies. And so I joined the Field Act with Aaron Houchin that gives them access to the internet. I have talked to Mark Messner, who I think is a gentleman, and I have talked to Rudy Yakum about the utility rates in Northwest Indiana. We had that conversation on the floor yesterday. And what we can do together with Mayor Dermody out of LaPorte to be able to do everything we can from the federal, state, and city level to reduce the skyrocketing utility rates. So they're towing the political line. I understand the fear theory of what comes out of the White House, but I will not allow that to change me or change the relationships that I work with every day. And as we opened up with, that is the civil way in which to do things. They have a political posture, but then we have to work in a bipartisan way in order to accomplish things here in Washington, D.C.
Republicans claim population shifts since 2020 justify redrawing the maps, and they also claim counting people who are in the country illegally skewed the maps. Now, I should point out the census does count people regardless of immigration status, but what few studies there are show that there's not a whole lot of impact from that. Do post-2020 population shifts justify redrawing the maps?
We're mid-decade. I don't think, in my personal opinion, I don't think anything justifies them. I think that the state legislature was very proud of the maps that they drew. And so I don't know, we're in a day and age that you have to ask the question, what can't you justify? So 5 years ago, they were great maps. They received the letter grade A. I believe that moderate Republicans are very proud of those maps. And I think that the public overwhelmingly is saying this isn't something that we need to do. And so as we were talking about how we bring the country together, I'm a firm believer that if you have all red states and all blue states, you're going to expand or you're going to accelerate extremism. You're not going to have people reaching across the aisle or finding middle ground for issues. I worked with Senator Banks on making sure that U.S. Steel stayed domestically owned. U.S. Steel is in my district. The steel workers and my whole economy is dependent upon making that U.S. Steel and our steel industry thrives. We worked together and sent a letter to this administration saying, let's ensure that it's domestically owned. Now we'll work together to make sure Nippon fulfills their obligations that they have promised as far as their investment to the workers, their contracts to the workers, and the property taxes that they will pay. So if you want to be able to, in the theme of what we opened up with, political violence and de-escalating that, then let's work in a country and let's make steps that we work in a bipartisan way. And here's the other thing with having an all red state and an all blue state. I'm on the appropriations committee, Garrett. There's 63 members out of 435 that decide or prioritize where those dollars go. I'm one of the only members out of Indiana that's on that. So I work with Governor Braun to be able to bring dollars back. I work with my United States senators to make sure that we're bringing big projects and work and wealth to my community. And I work with my other members. They will not be in the majority forever. So it is short-term thinking, or it's not looking at the chessboard of long-term thinking if you have all members. So I believe that I am an asset in a bipartisan way to deliver for Northwest Indiana as we have up until this point.
The Cook Political Report currently lists your district as D+1. How concerned are you about being drawn into a heavily Republican district if this goes forward?
I'm just moving forward, and like I said, I'm not letting it change me. All these decisions are going to be made in Indianapolis. I have a high confidence level that the moderate Hoosier values are going to overcome the pressure that's going to be coming from outside sources. And you know what? I'm going to continue to do what I can to make sure that we are an operating government, that my district has the resources to be able to create jobs, that my unions are be able to have good benefits, and that they have project labor agreements, and that they're able to collectively bargain. Those are the things that are important to me. You're talking about politics and what these statistics mean. I was a township trustee for 15 years. During that time, I did a lot of work. I had one of the largest townships within the state of Indiana, Hammond, Whiting, East Chicago, Highland, and Munster. And I worked my way up where I became president of the township associations. So if I'm moving my location into rural central Indiana, I have the endorsement of the Farm Bureau, and I have these relationships with township trustees and their boards, because we went to battle with Governor, at that time, Governor Daniels, who was looking to get rid of the townships, and we built lasting relationships. So when it comes to volunteer firemen and understanding the value that they have to their community and the value that the township trustees have in the rural areas, that's something that is in my wheelhouse. So I certainly want to make sure that I keep my eye on the ball and make sure that I keep on doing my job. The statistics and the percentages, of course, those data points have values, but all I can do is what I can control, and I'm going to work in a bipartisan way to produce results, to make sure that we have healthcare that people can afford, mental health that is accessible, jobs that people can go to, innovation in our state that is thriving, and make sure that we continue to use all of these, our great institutions, our learning institutions, to empower young people to become whatever they dream of.
I want to turn to trade policy. As you mentioned earlier, your district includes the Gary Works. Last month, you sent a letter to the Trump administration asking them to clarify the veto power that the U.S. government will have over certain business operations with Nippon Steel, and that's coming from their merger with U.S. Steel. Have you received any reply to that letter?
We have not received a reply, but we will stay on it. It was a multi-level or a number of different members who joined me on that letter. Keep in mind, I am co-chair of the Steel Caucus, which is a bipartisan caucus. Chairman Crawford out of Alabama is someone that I work in a bipartisan way. Our goal, as I mentioned earlier, is because of the steel industry in Northwest Indiana being an economic engine, not only for steel workers, but all the ancillary trade men and women who do the maintenance and do all the work. So electricians, carpenters, iron workers, all carpenters, operating engineers, all those unions and trade men and women are dependent upon the steel trade. So we want in writing to know exactly, tell us or ensure to us that these investments are going to happen in Northwest Indiana. Ensure us that our men and women are going to continue to work and thrive. And decades down the line, we will continue to lead the nation, which I believe is a national security issue in the production of steel. And so I will write letters. I will talk to them in person. I'll sit down at tables with them, but I am going to do my job to make sure that that Nippon fulfills the obligation, not only to the steel workers when they have contract negotiations, to make sure they have health care, to make sure that they have collective bargaining rights, and to make sure they have fair wages and a safe working condition, and to make sure the trades are doing the maintenance of the billions of dollars that have been promised. And the city of Gary, in which I represent, the city of Gary in Northwest Indiana and Lake County, to make sure Nippon pays their fair share of taxes. Because when they were going through the process of talking to everyone about how great they're going to be, they said they were going to increase or pay their fair share of property taxes, which will benefit my community, Gary, Indiana, and the people I represent.
I have two more questions for you. The president recently expanded the list of steel and aluminum products that are subject to a 50% tariff. So far, have the steel tariffs had any discernible impact one way or another on your district?
Well, those tariffs were announced at the Nippon deal, so let's break that down. At first, the president of the United States told the steel workers in Pittsburgh he was adamantly against the Nippon deal. Then after he was sworn in and 6 months later, he negotiated that the Nippon deal would go through with U.S. Steel. What people need to understand is upper management of U.S. Steel, they were able to receive golden parachutes to the tune of about $300 million. And so $170 million to the CEO, other millions to the upper management. And so let's make sure we protect the working class. And so ultimately, what I want to say about the tariffs is he announced them on the day that he was allowing that transaction to go through. And that benefits the steel industry. That protects us, because what it goes on is China, who's an adversary, they have subsidized steel, which means the government helps pay for that steel production. And then it's an unlevel playing field for our steel workers. And when they flood the market with subsidized steel, then we don't produce as much. And so these tariffs, Section 232 tariffs, which I was for when I got here the first time that President Trump put them in place. President Biden, I lobbied him, sent letters, and talked to him specifically about the importance of Section 232. And right now, those tariffs are protecting our steel industry from adversaries that want to be able to manipulate our trade policies and circumvent them. And so what goes on is China will mass produce steel. They'll take it through Mexico or Vietnam or another country. They'll subsidize it, and then they'll dump it into our market, and then it allows for an unlevel playing field. These tariffs protect against that. So as I mentioned earlier, I take very seriously protecting the U.S. steelworkers, the trade men and women, and all the ancillary manufacturers in Northwest Indiana and throughout our state and our country to make sure we have fair trade policies. And those steel and aluminum tariffs are protecting us right now.
Before we go, I want to ask about the upcoming government shutdown deadline. It's coming up on September 30th. As you mentioned, you're on the House Appropriations Committee. What do you want to see before you become a yes vote on those bills that would fund the government and keep the government open?
Well, what I want to see is first and foremost, the understanding of the process. The Republicans have the majority in the House. The Republicans have the majority in the Senate, and they have the White House. So this is their budget to be able to pass. What I want to make sure that we're doing is, as the big beautiful bill cut Medicaid by billions of dollars in Indiana, so people have less access. A couple examples of that: seniors who are going to senior citizen homes may not have access. Our federally qualified health centers throughout the state, with their cuts, won't be able to give health care to individuals on a sliding scale who may have a high deductible employed insurance policy. And so there is a crisis. A parent whose child may be going to a public school who has a medical or a Medicaid waiver because they have a disability, those are all at risk. It's the perfect storm. So I believe that it is worth fighting for to make sure that we have health care coverage. I was on Veteran Affairs for 4 years. I want to make sure that when we pass the Honor the Pact Act, which allows veterans to be able to get presumptive health care benefits if they were exposed to fire pits, radiation, Agent Orange, those types of things are worth fighting for, because as this administration is cutting the number of employees at the VA, there will be lack of access. And when you have lack of access, then you have veterans who won't be getting health care. When you cut SNAP funding, that's extremely important. And when you give the power of the purse to the President of the United States when it comes to tariffs, and you have farmers looking you in the eye and saying our input costs are out of control and our markets are limited, you've got to do something in order to make sure that we can survive. And so when people ask why their grocery costs are so high, it's because there's a 40% increase to the farmer from their input costs. So those are things that are worth fighting for. But again, I want to make it very clear: the president, the majority in the House, and the majority in the Senate, they have the responsibility to be able to pass this budget. And those are the things that I'm fighting for.
Congressman Frank Mrvan, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Garrett.
That was Indiana Democratic Congressman Frank Mrvan. Remember, you can catch All Indiana Politics every Sunday morning at 9:30, only on Wish TV. I'm Garrett Bergquist. Thanks for listening.
From Wish TV, this is All Indiana Politics Podcast on the All Indiana Podcast Network. Watch All Indiana Politics live Sunday mornings at 9:30 on Wish TV and at wishtv.com. Subscribe to this podcast and listen weekly here on the All Indiana Podcast Network. And be sure to discover even more great podcasts at allindianapodcastnetwork.com.